This podcast contains descriptions of violence against children and adult language and is not suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Hi everyone, and welcome to Suffer the Little Children, the true crime podcast, giving voices back to the victims of child abuse and shining a harsh spotlight on the parents, guardians, and caretakers who silence them. I'm your host, Lane, and this is episode 102, Fallon Fridley. On December 9th, 2020, in Sandy Springs, Georgia, 2-year-old Fallon Fridley was spending the night at the home of her babysitter, who was also a good friend of Fallon's mom, Kristin. The babysitter, Kirstie Flood, called 911 that evening to report little Fallon unresponsive, and Fallon was taken by ambulance to the hospital, where she was later pronounced dead. Kirstie claimed Fallon had taken a fall earlier that day at the playground, but after incriminating online searches were found on her phone, Kirstie was arrested 2 days after Fallon's death. As Kirstie continues to await trial, additional damning information has been discovered by investigators, including video footage of the actual crime. In this episode, you'll also hear my conversation with Fallon's heartbroken mommy, Kristin Gantt, who told me about her special little girl and how her loss has affected her family. This is the tragic story of Fallon Fridley. I'd like to thank my newest patrons, Stephanie P. from Canterbury, New Hampshire, and Melanie G. and Leslie D. from Isla Nublar, where I hope they're watching out for those velociraptors. Thank you all so much for your support. You can visit patreon.com/stlcpod. I first covered Fallon's story on Suffer the Little Children blog in December of 2020, and I've been following it ever since. Unlike some of the kids I cover on the podcast and the blog, Fallon was cherished, doted on, and clearly loved by everyone who knew her. This story will enrage you, and likely make you think twice, and 3 times, and 4, about who you trust to care for your children. In fact, by the end of this episode, you might have a hard time trusting anyone. Fallon Lynn Fridley was born on September 27, 2018, in Hollywood, Florida, the only child of then 25-year-old Kristin Ann Fridley. Fallon was utterly adored by her mother, her grandma Cheryl, aunts Stephanie and Cindy, and all of her extended family. She was a tiny girl with blonde hair, blue eyes, chubby cheeks, and a radiant smile. In October of 2020, Kristin married Fallon's stepfather, Cameron Gantt, who was absolutely crazy about the little girl he loved as his own daughter. The feeling was mutual, too. Fallon called Cameron Dada. Kristin works as a veterinary technician at Fur Kids Animal Rescue and Shelters, which is a nonprofit organization headquartered in Atlanta that operates Georgia's largest animal rescue operation, including cage-free, no-kill shelters. While Kristin worked, Fallon attended daycare, but in August of 2020, due to financial problems stemming from the COVID-19 pandemic, the daycare facility closed, leaving Kristin to find someone else to care for Fallon while she worked. Conveniently, her close friend, 29-year-old Kirstie Flood, was a stay-at-home mom, so Kristin made arrangements with Kirstie to watch Fallon a few days a week. The two women had been friends for the past several years, and Kirstie's 3-year-old daughter was Fallon's best friend, so it seemed like the perfect arrangement. Kirstie also had an infant son who was about 3 months old at the time, and she seemed to be an attentive, doting mother. Kristin told Channel 2,
"She'd been watching Fallon since August and treated her like her own child."
On December 9th, 2020, Kristin dropped Fallon off at Kirstie's apartment. That afternoon, Kirstie texted Kristin to ask her if Fallon could spend the night, and after some thought, Kristin agreed, knowing Fallon would have a blast sleeping over with Kirstie's daughter for the first time. At some point during the day, Kirstie took Fallon and her kids to play at a nearby park. Kristin later said,
I had spoken to her around 8:30 and she said Fallon had just eaten dinner. She was fine. She was in bed. And then she calls me hysterically about an hour later saying that Fallon wasn't moving.
The babysitter told Kristin that Fallon had hit her head on a slide at the playground earlier. At 8:44 p.m., a 911 call was placed from Unit 507 at the Edgewater apartment complex on Monterey Parkway in Sandy Springs, Georgia. This was the apartment occupied by Kirstie Flood, her boyfriend Jeffrey Myers, Kirstie's 3-year-old daughter, and the couple's infant son. The call reported an unresponsive 2-year-old girl, and when EMS responded, they found Fallon Fridley not breathing and immediately began administering CPR. Fallon was rushed to Children's Healthcare of Atlanta at Scottish Rite, but the little blonde cherub had closed her big, beautiful blue eyes for the last time. Tragically, 2-year-old Fallon was pronounced dead at 1:18 a.m. on Thursday, December 10, 2020. The Sandy Springs police immediately began an investigation into Fallon's death. Doctors at Children's Healthcare said Fallon's injuries were not consistent with the story Kirstie had given about hitting her head after falling off a slide. An autopsy was conducted, during which the medical examiner determined that while in Kirstie's care, Fallon had suffered severe injuries that resulted in her death. Those injuries included, according to the arrest affidavit, a massive skull fracture and lacerations to multiple organs, including her liver, spleen, and colon. Even more horrific, the autopsy also revealed bleeding that was apparently caused by sexual battery. Fallon's death was ruled a homicide. A search warrant revealed that the situation was even more sinister than it initially appeared. When examining Kirstie's cell phone, police found that around the time of her assault on Fallon, Kirstie conducted Safari searches for the following terms: mental help, what type of people enjoy abusing other people's children, I hit my child and I feel guilty, what does it mean to have a sudden urge to beat a child that's not yours? Kristin told a reporter,
and it's like this evil was in front of my face for years and I never saw it.
On Friday, December 11, 2020, 29-year-old Kirstie Hannah Flood, who is originally from Smyrna, Georgia, was arrested and booked into the Fulton County Jail, where you'd also find the accused in another case I've covered on the blog. During her stay, Kirstie may even have the occasion to chat with Titiana Phillips, who was charged in July of 2020 with the aggravated assault by vehicle and murder of her 3-month-old son, Kyundre Henderson. Kirstie, who was initially charged with malice murder, 2 counts of felony murder, aggravated battery, and first-degree cruelty to children, remains held in the Fulton County Jail without bond 14 months later. Kirstie's friends were reportedly stunned by her arrest. Sherry Travis told Channel 2, "She loves children. Her children are her whole world. She posts about her children every single day. She's an amazing mom. She would never hurt a child." Her friend Ashley Von Allman told the news station,
"She has a huge heart and she's just a wonderful
She would
human
never
being.
hurt a kid. There's just no way."
Kirstie's criminal past also came to light after her arrest, revealing that she was arrested 5 times before she even reached the age of 21 for charges running the gamut from battery to alcohol use and drug possession. In 2010, she was arrested for battery, underage possession, contributing to the delinquency of a minor, and criminal trespass. Her last arrest prior to Fallon's death took place in November of 2012 during a traffic stop, when Kirstie was found to be in possession of alprazolam, better known as Xanax, for which she did not have a prescription. For that offense, Kirstie pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 3 years of probation, which was revoked in 2013 after she failed to comply with conditions that included submitting to a drug test, paying court costs and fines, and completing 150 hours of community service. She cooled her heels in jail for 15 days before being released into her probation officer's supervision. Court records show that an eviction complaint against Kirstie was filed in September of 2020 due to non-payment of rent. She was in the midst of an eviction process at the time of Fallon's murder. One acquaintance of Kirstie's posted on Facebook, "My daughter lives upstairs from her. Yes, she has 2 kids of her own. Crazy how just months ago she was slashing my daughter's tires, and I had to go defend my child, and the police didn't have enough evidence to arrest her. Maybe if they did, this baby would still be alive today. She seemed to love her kids very much. Never in a million years would I have thought she'd do this to another child. She has watched my grandkids numerous times when her and my daughter was close." Another woman posted, "Kirstie used to watch my child. and my child told me Kirstie used to yell and hit Kirstie's daughter all the time. She also screamed and put my child in timeout the last time she watched her. Literally a few days before Kirstie killed that innocent baby, I had called Austin super upset about Kirstie disciplining our daughter and how I wasn't okay with someone raising their voice at my child. It hit really close to home. A former friend posted in January of 2021, I wanted so bad to believe you were innocent, that this was an accident, that the charges were marked up. We got high together, partied together. You watched me get sober, I messed up, and then watched you get sober. You worked so hard to have the life you had. You were an amazing mother to 2 beautiful children. Kirstie, I don't know what caused you to do this, but you deserve every punishment coming your way. I'm now sickened to have known you, to have ever associated with you. If you believe at this point she's innocent, then I'm sorry. I won't defend her. It will come out, and she'll have life made in prison as a lifer. Her poor children didn't deserve this either. Just fucking sick. #Justice for Fallon. In Fallon's murder case, Kirstie is being represented by attorney Priscilla Upshaw. As the evidence mounts against Kirstie, Ms. Upshaw has her work cut out for her. Fallon's funeral was held on Thursday, December 17th at Poole Funeral Home Chapel, where a viewing took place the evening before. Fallon was laid to rest in a tiny pink casket in the Rolling Hills Memory Gardens Cemetery in Woodstock, Georgia. I'll include a few heartbreaking photos of Fallon's funeral in the Facebook album for this episode. Kristin's co-workers, Samantha Shelton and Robin Yeager, created a GoFundMe campaign to raise funds for the bereaved mother. Samantha, the CEO of Fur Kids Animal Rescue and Shelters, told the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that Fallon loved animals as much as her mother does and may have followed in Kristin's footsteps to become a veterinary technician. Samantha told the newspaper that Fallon, who had practiced taking care of animals in need, was growing in her mother's example to be kind and good-hearted. Samantha said, "You just want to wake up. This is just a horrible, horrible nightmare. This is not real. It's one thing to lose your child to an illness or an accident you can't control, but to have someone you knew and trusted harm your child, kill your child. It's going to be a long road to recovery. Our hearts are so heavy." Saying the Fur Kids team, including Kristin, had already seen too much cruelty as animal rescue workers, Samantha added, "We've seen the worst of humanity, we thought, but now we really have experienced it." In an update to the fundraising campaign, Samantha wrote, "We recognize it will take a long time for Kristin to process what has happened and come to terms with the new life ahead of her. We want to give her the time she will need to recover, so we adjusted the fundraising goal to allow the community to rally in support of Kristin and in memory of her beloved child. No amount of money could ever help heal a crushed heart and spirit, but it will allow her to properly bury her child, pay her deductible and medical bills, and pay some living expenses until she is on her feet again." As of this recording, the campaign has raised over $63,000 of its $65,000 goal. Kristin created a Facebook page, Justice for Fallon, where she posts photo and video memories of her daughter, as well as updates about the case and her efforts to work toward justice for Fallon. I'll include a link to the Facebook group in the show notes for today's episode. On Wednesday, January 27, 2021, a second individual was charged in Fallon's death. Kirstie's boyfriend, 28-year-old Jeffrey Scott Myers, was initially charged with second-degree murder and second-degree cruelty to children. Although Jeffrey initially claimed he was at work at the time Fallon was injured, the arrest warrant indicated that he was present in the Monterey Parkway apartment when Fallon's fatal injuries occurred. Sandy Springs Police Detective William Delaney wrote in the warrant, "After reviewing the totality of the information gained during the investigation, specifically the timeline of the infliction of the injuries to the time that the child was incapacitated was moments, Mr. Myers was present and witness to the alleged abuse." In the warrant, Detective Delaney described bruising all over Fallon's head, on her abdomen, and on her arms and legs, including her elbows. Police apparently did not believe Jeffrey inflicted any of the injuries on Fallon. The affidavit states that, nonetheless, he had a duty to protect the child from the assault and intervene on her behalf. Mr. Myers appeared on video interacting with the child in a loving manner, and by his own admission, the child victim was like a family member. By his inaction, the child sustained multiple injuries that resulted in the child victim's death. Jeffrey was arrested on January 6th for a probation violation and was booked into Fulton County Jail. He was later transferred to the Coffee Correctional Facility, a state prison, where he is currently incarcerated. He has since shaved both his face and his head, drastically changing his appearance. Jeffrey's probation violation stems from two separate incidents. The first was an arrest in July of 2017 for cocaine possession and driving without insurance. The second was an arrest in September of 2019 for possession of heroin, cocaine, and less than 1 ounce of marijuana, as well as a seatbelt violation. On the charges relating to Fallon's murder, Jeffrey was denied bond. He has retained attorney Mario Cladis for his defense. In January of 2021, Kristin and Cameron moved out of their former apartment. Kristin said on the Justice for Fallon Facebook page, "It was too hard and too traumatizing for me to re-enter that apartment. I have not been back since I rushed out to get Fallon at the hospital on December 9th. Kristin and Cameron appeared on Dr. Phil's television show on Tuesday, February 2nd, 2021. During the episode, they discussed some points that had not yet been disclosed in the media, including the following message that Kirstie sent to Kristin on the evening of December 10th, not even 24 hours after Fallon died. "I don't have a phone. They took it, but I love you and Fallon so much, and I really hope you know I would never hurt her. She's been with me for forever and has always been so happy, and we both know that. She's the sweetest little angel and never even cried. I love you, and I'm praying you find it in your heart to forgive me, and I know I can't say as much as I need to or want to, but I would never hurt her. She was like a second daughter to me. When you're ready, please message me. In the meantime, I'm deactivating my Facebook. I love you."
Kirstie had finally texted me back around 6:30, said she was home, everything was fine, and I said, "Okay, well, let me FaceTime my girl." And she said, "Give me an hour, let my phone charge." About an hour later, she FaceTime called me. She was holding the phone directed at Fallon, and Fallon was propped up in the bed, and Kirstie had told me that she just woke Fallon up so she could talk to me. It was dim in the room, and Kirstie was holding the phone at least 5 feet away from my daughter, so I could see her, and she didn't look bruised or anything like that, but Fallon was not responding to me. I just assumed that she was just tired because she had woken her up. But I was a little worried because she just seemed so out of it.
Fallon wasn't talking to Chris, which is very unusual. Fallon's always usually a chirpy talking person, especially to her mom or her dad.
Fallon was staring at me, didn't say anything until I said, "Hey, Fallon, do you want to talk to Daddy?"
And I leaned over and I said, "Hey, baby." And as soon as I said, "Hey, baby," and looked at her, the phone just went off. That's when my nerves just went nuts. Something in my gut was saying, "Go pick up Fallon." I looked over to Chris and I said, "Honey, should we go pick her up?"
When I go back on it, I wish that we'd gone and got her. And I wonder if we had gotten to her sooner, if something could have been done to save her life. Every day, I wonder if I just gotten there for her, and I regret so much that I wasn't there. I would just regret, just the trust I had in my friend, and I really just thought, oh, she's just tired.
So when the phone cut out, then you text and you called.
Yes.
And that there was no contact, right? And so you tried her boyfriend, who was also at the house.
Yes.
Correct. About 3 phone calls.
Before he finally answered the phone.
And what was that exchange?
It was him and Kirstie on speaker. Kirstie saying that yet again her phone had died. She was sorry. Fallon had eaten dinner. She's in bed. She's great. Everything's great, which calmed my nerves a little bit. And that day she had been texting me things like, "She's in the best of hands. Don't worry."
And you're saying maybe I should just go get her.
Yeah, it was at 8:44. We finally got off the phone, and just something in my gut was like, she's acting weird. That's the second time her phone has died. And it was just real odd, and just something in my gut was saying, "Go get Fallon."
This is 8 o'clock, and at 8:44, Flood's boyfriend calls 911 saying that Fallon is unresponsive, and this is before even notifying you.
Yes.
Is it your belief that at the time of this FaceTime call that your daughter had already been beaten?
It's hard to say. Surely looking back, it would seem that way. But I didn't see any bruising or swelling. But again, she had the phone 5 feet away. The room was dim. So if she had been bruised, I don't know that it could have seen it. She had sent me a picture of Fallon and her daughter in the car seats on the way back from the park. And Fallon had a little smile. But I honestly don't know.
Take me through the moment that you got the call.
She was hysterical. She was saying, come to my house, Fallon's not moving. They're working on her. And I'm like, hold on. What do you mean they're working on her? She's like, oh, she has a pulse. She's like, oh, I don't know. She hit her head on the slide earlier.
She didn't tell you any of this when you talked to her before. She didn't tell you she fell and hit her head on the slide.
No.
She didn't tell you that when you FaceTimed with her. She didn't tell you that at all. And now all of a sudden she has fallen and hit her head on the slide and has a pulse.
Yes. So an officer got on the phone and they said they're transporting your daughter to the hospital. Meet them there.
Then when you get there and the doctor comes out, and what did he tell you was wrong with her?
A fractured skull. Her liver was ruptured. Her spleen was ruptured. And I didn't find out until later because there was so much blood that was hard to see with the scans, but her colon was also ruptured.
Where was Flood at this point?
At her apartment.
She didn't come to the hospital?
No.
Take me through the moment they told you, we have to stop. We're doing more harm than good.
They brought us up to the ICU. And yeah, there was at least 20 nurses and they're taking turns doing CPR. And the doctor said, I'm going to have to call it. And I said, no, we're not going to call it. So she let it go on about 5 or 6 more times. And she told me right before the last time, if her pulse doesn't come back, to call it.
What was your thought when you realized this child is dead?
Wake me up from this nightmare, and I'm just on my knees, begging for God to take the heart from my chest and put it in hers. Take me, don't take Fallon from my mama.
On February 24th, 2021, the Edgewater at Sandy Springs, the apartment complex where Kirstie and Jeffrey lived, and its management company, Bridge Property Management, won a default judgment against Kirstie on the eviction proceeding that began in September of 2020. As she and Jeffrey are both currently residing behind bars, they're considered to have vacated the property, but Kirstie now has a judgment against her to the tune of $6,300 and change for unpaid rent. If they're convicted, it may be a while before their landlord sees a penny, if ever. Also in February of 2021, a woman named Dorothy Payton created a GoFundMe campaign to raise funds on behalf of Avery, the father of Kirstie Flood's daughter, who I'll call HF. According to Dorothy, who is HF's stepmother, when Kirstie was arrested on December 11, 2020, DCFS placed HF with her maternal grandmother, Karen Flood, who lives near Atlanta. She wasn't placed with her biological father, Avery, because, although paternity was proven through a DNA test, Avery never took Kirstie to court to legitimize himself as the father of her daughter. Dorothy said in the campaign, "We thought about it many times, but we were working on our relationship with Kirstie, and were seeing her daughter pretty regularly. We didn't want to rock the boat." Unfortunately, after Kirstie's arrest, the need for Avery's legitimacy quickly became apparent. After she was jailed, Kirstie called Avery's family several times, proclaiming her innocence and repeating her story about Fallon falling at the park. The more they learned about the evidence against Kirstie, however, the harder they found it to believe Kirstie's tale. Dorothy wrote, "Kirstie kept calling, and a lot of the time she was very arrogant with Avery about how he has no rights to her daughter, and that he is not getting her. Other times, she was laughing and acting like she didn't have a care in the world." After Avery's family saw Kristin and Cameron on Dr. Phil, they stopped answering Kirstie's phone calls, putting the money they would have spent talking to her instead towards saving for a lawyer of their own. They were able to video chat with Avery's daughter each night, and they even visited her the day after Christmas to give her the gifts they bought her. They were geared up to visit her during her birthday weekend in February, to the point that their trunk was packed with her birthday gifts. However, just days before they were scheduled to leave, Kirstie's mother convinced her 3-year-old granddaughter to ask them on video chat why they weren't answering her mommy's phone calls. Dorothy said, "They have held HF over Avery's head from day one, and if Avery was not performing to appease Kirstie, she would cut off contact with HF until she wasn't bitter anymore. I wish I had a nickel for every time I heard another story of a parent cutting off other family members as punishment for some perceived slight." After Avery and his family retained a lawyer, within days, Kirstie's mother messaged Avery to tell him that if he couldn't communicate with Kirstie, he was no longer permitted to contact his daughter. Now for some good news. Last year, Avery filed for legitimacy, and subsequently, he was able to take his daughter home. Kirstie has appealed the court's decision, but I can't imagine she'll get far with that, considering she's likely to remain behind bars for the rest of her life. Kirstie's mother, Fallon Flood, and Jeffrey's mother, Gina Myers, continue to battle over custody of the couple's shared son. That case remains open in Fulton County Family Court. As for Avery's daughter, if Kirstie's case goes to trial, HF will likely have to testify, as she is believed to be a witness to the incident that killed Fallon. For that matter, HF may also have to testify against her grandmother, Karen. In a development that wasn't reported on by the news, on June 26, 2021, Kirstie's mother, Fallon Flood, was arrested by the Sandy Springs Police Department and booked into Fulton County Jail on a single charge of influencing a witness. She was released on July 6th of the same year on an unsecured bond of $10,000. She is represented by attorney Michael Welsh. As it turns out, as soon as Kirstie was arrested and Karen took over the care of her 3-year-old granddaughter, the woman began coaching HF, telling her never to say anything bad about her mommy. When the girl was taken for a forensic interview at the Forsyth County Child Advocacy Center, although she was captured on video witnessing Fallon's abuse, HF did not disclose the abuse to the forensic interviewer. She did, however, disclose that she was told by her grandmother what to say during her interview. In an emergency motion filed with the court on June 25, 2021, the state requested Karen's contact with her granddaughter immediately restricted, citing Karen's indictment for influencing a witness and also mentioning that Karen is emotionally unstable and has made comments to her co-defendant, Kirstie Flood, about her desires to self-harm. On the same day, the state also filed a motion to admit surveillance video. Shockingly, the motion stated that Kirstie Flood and Jeffrey Myers had been charged with tampering with evidence and false statements for concealing a surveillance camera police initially observed perched behind the sofa in the living room area of their apartment and for lying to police about Fallon's murder. As a result of these new developments, additional charges were filed against both Kirstie and Jeffrey. The current charges against Kirstie include murder, 2 counts of felony murder, aggravated battery, aggravated sexual battery, first-degree cruelty to children, second-degree cruelty to children, making false statements, and tampering with evidence. Jeffrey's current charges relating to Fallon's death include second-degree murder, second-degree cruelty to children, making false statements, and tampering with evidence. Based on what authorities found on the SD card recovered from the camera, they still do not believe Jeffrey physically harmed Fallon himself. According to court documents, however, he was visible in the video footage, standing by and doing absolutely nothing, while Kirstie savagely abused her close friend's 2-year-old. Her own daughter was also seen in the footage, meaning the poor little girl saw most, if not all, of what her mother did to her best friend. It's beyond heartbreaking. In October of 2021, Karen's attorney filed a motion to sever her case from those of Kirstie and Jeffrey. A hearing on these and several other motions has been scheduled in the case for March 14, 2022, before Judge Emily Richardson. On the Justice for Fallon page in January of 2022, Kristin made a post sharing some amazing news, saying she and Cameron had received a beautiful early Christmas gift from their little guardian angel, Fallon. On December 18, 2021, a year and a day after they laid Fallon to rest, Kristin and Cameron welcomed their son into the world. He was about a month early, but weighed a healthy 7 pounds, 12 ounces, and he is absolutely beautiful. After being in contact for over a year, I finally had the opportunity to speak with Fallon's mommy, Kristin, last week. Here is my conversation with Kristin Gantt. I have a very special guest on the podcast today. I'm speaking with Kristin Gantt, Fallon's mom. Thanks very much for coming on. I'm so glad to finally get to speak with you.
I know it's been a while. We've been trying to connect for probably a year, and I finally felt like, okay, I can do it now.
It's got to be incredibly hard to talk about Fallon every time someone asks you. It's got to be just a lot.
It is, and her case is pretty high profile. The DA said the most high profile in Atlanta. And every time I talk about it publicly, there's always that one person that's just awful. You know, for the most part, everyone's been super nice and supportive and amazing, but you get those people, and it's really strange that, you know, it's true when they say the one person that says something bad is so much louder than all the good. And it's been really hard for me and my husband and my family, you know, to have to not only go through losing Fallon, but to deal with horrible people on the internet as well.
Yeah, the internet has given a lot of people a voice who maybe shouldn't have one. It can be so judgmental and awful for no reason. They've never been in someone's situation, but they immediately think they know what they would do and what you should have done. And in your case, this was just so unexpected, coming from someone who was a friend of yours and who you trusted. And I just can't see any way that you would have seen any red flags or known any better.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the terrifying part, is she was a good friend, one of my best friends since 2016. And she'd watched Fallon for a few months prior to this, and I never had any problems. There was no red flags. Fallon loved to go over there. She loved hanging out with her daughter. I mean, there was days I'd go pick her up and she wanted to keep playing. We went trick-or-treating together. She never seemed scared of Kirstie or Jeff, and it really did just seem to come out of nowhere. So as much as I blame myself and how guilty I feel, I too try to remind myself that I had no reason not to trust this woman.
Right, exactly. It's almost as if you were leaving her with family. You had that level of trust with her.
People say, oh, that's why only grandparents watch my kid. Well, you know, not everyone has that luxury, one.
Exactly.
And two, you don't know the relationship we had. And then people won't even have the full story. And they'll say, well, that's why I don't leave my children with people I don't know. And it's like, did you even listen? It's extremely frustrating. And it's all these people think they would know what they would do in this situation, when I don't wish this on anybody. And I promise you, you don't know what you would do until it happens.
Right. Yeah. It's a lack of empathy that I see all too often. And I'm the first one to just leap into a comment section and start defending someone when it comes to that stuff. It just drives me crazy. And a lot of, you know, the shows and the podcasts and things that tell stories that are this horrible don't seem to approach it from the victim's perspective. So it really is important to me to respect the child and their family.
I agree, and I love that for you. And I'm going to be honest, I've listened to bits and pieces of your podcast, not because it's not beautifully done. It's just so heartbreaking. But I think what you do is so necessary. I really appreciate how you come at from the child's perspective, and you give those children a voice, you know, and that's what I always want to do with Fallon. Is I want people to remember her for the beautiful 2-year-old she was. She was sweet. She had a huge personality, and I don't want her to be remembered as the 2-year-old that was murdered. You know, that breaks my heart so much. She was so much more than what happened to her.
Exactly.
And I think you really do a beautiful job of voicing things from the children's perspectives in a way. And I really think it's beautiful and so necessary what you do. And I really commend you, because it's hard. A lot of podcasts that do true crime don't even cover children's episodes because they're just too heartbreaking. Murder is horrible no matter who it happens to, but it's something about what happens to a child that is just so much harder to wrap your brain around because they're so innocent.
Exactly. I think that's why people have a hard time listening to it. It's something that a lot of people won't touch. And that's basically why I started in the first place. No one was talking about the kids, and few and far between, you'll hear a news story about a child. But it's so important, I think, to tell these stories, not only to keep their memories alive, because the kids deserve to be remembered for who they were, not what happened to them, but also because if we don't know what to look for, we won't look for it.
Exactly.
You know, we can't prevent it if we don't know what we're looking at. So I think the awareness is helpful. Mm-hmm. And I've had a lot of people tell me that they're more vigilant now that they've heard these stories, and that means everything to me. That's the most important thing.
That's amazing. And when I tell Fallon's story, I don't do it to terrify people. I don't want people to stop bringing their kids to daycares or leaving them with trusted friends, but it's just a cautionary tale, and I feel bad telling it sometimes, like I'm going to ruin someone's day, or again, I don't want to terrify people.
So when you tell people Fallon's story, what do you feel like is something that they can watch out for?
Again, it's hard to say, and it's taken me over a year to wrap my mind around it, because that's what I want to do, right? I want people to be able to spot a sociopath or predict people's behavior. But the truth is, people are people, and you cannot control or predict their behavior. And that's the scariest part, right? Now, looking back on Kirstie, there was a few little things she did that could have been red flags that maybe in hindsight, could I have changed something? But again, it's really hard to say. Now, in my situation, finding out things after the fact, if I had only known, right? Kirstie, to other friends and family, was saying horrible things about me. She would lie about stupid things, right? Like, we had a number set on how much I was going to pay her a week for childcare. She was out of work due to COVID. She's a bartender. I'm an essential employee. I'm a veterinary assistant. I was working double time. So we had a number set, and it helped me and it helped her. And she was telling people, she was doing this for free, or that I was abusing her, and all kinds of crazy things behind the scenes. It was small things like that. So, and there was one situation where Fallon had a couple little scratches on her face, and this was weeks before the incident. And I feel like, was I just working too much overtime? I was trying to have a good Christmas. Did I not pick up on the signs? But the truth is, Fallon never really gave me any signs. So the day she had these scratches on her face, she had told me in a text her 10-month-old son scratched her. And then a few texts down, she said the dog did it. And she had also told me and my husband that the dog did it. So I sat Fallon down and I said, Fallon, who scratched your face? And she held her little cheek and she said, ow, puppy. So I dropped it. So it was a weird situation, right? Maybe I should have confronted her on that. Be like, okay, I have her telling me the dog did it. You told me the dog did it, but you also told me your son did it. Who did it? And, maybe if I had pressed her a little on this situation. And the truth is, I don't know to this day. If Fallon told me the dog did it, did the dog do it? And the abuse didn't start happening until that night. I have no reason to believe she was abusing my daughter until the night she killed her. But it drives me crazy, right? Going back and looking at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, was there a sign there that I just totally missed because I was busy,
Yeah.
And I hate that. I hate it so much.
Yeah, you must have spent a lot of time doing that, going through every detail in your mind. And I just honestly think, something like that, most people wouldn't even think twice about it. Maybe she misspoke. It could have been anything. For you to blame yourself for not seeing signs like that, I know it's natural and you're thinking of yourself as you should have protected her. But at that time, you did trust Kirstie to protect her, and that was her job. And as your friend, you thought you could trust her to do that.
Absolutely. That's the scary thing, is that did I just chalk it up to a miscommunication? Did she have her son on dog on the bed and she wasn't sure who scratched her? And then she thought it was her son, and then she realized it was the dog. And then I go back and I'm like, dang, she shouldn't even have been able to have a dog scratch her face. But the way I am with Fallon, and I hope I'll be with my son, is that she was a toddler. Her head is a walking target. There were so many times at home she ran into something or fell. And, kids naturally are going to get small injuries, scraped knees, little bruises. Fallon was a daredevil. She would stand on top of things and I would tell her to get down and she'd tell me no. And we had this open dialogue to where if there's so much as a bruise or scratch, just call me and tell me immediately what happened. And in the past, she had done that. Hey, Fallon scratched her knee. We had an open communication that way. So it wasn't strange to me that she had let me know that the dog scratched her face, because you just send her home like that, I'm going to be very upset. But you had texted me prior with pictures and you told me the dog scratched her face. That was me thinking we had an open dialogue, which we did up until we didn't, I think I found out April of last year I was pregnant, late March or early April. And obviously I'm still grieving every day, but It's so much harder when it first happens. You're in this just cloud of grief and you can barely get out of bed. You can barely breathe. I mean, I had been losing my mind when I first saw. I mean, I'm talking like I was hearing voices and I wasn't sleeping and I really went down a dark hole. And as I'm starting to kind of try to climb out of that, I found out I was pregnant and I felt guilty at first. Of course I wanted this beautiful baby, but I'm like, how can I bring another child into this world when I don't have my Fallon? And I had to really work through that. And I just was like, she sent him to us on purpose. He's great. He's amazing. He's just like her. They have the same eating patterns and sleeping patterns. And obviously we'll never want to think he's Fallon reincarnated because he's his own person, But
Right.
He's so similar to her already when she was a newborn that I can't help but think I'm going to see a lot of her little mannerisms in him. And it's really neat. And she knew him before I knew him. And I really, truly believe she sent him down.
Yeah, she knew you guys needed someone to care for, and there he was.
Exactly. And it was crazy. It was, strangely enough, he was due on January 14th. And my water broke on December 17th, which is the same day we buried Fallon last year.
Wow.
So it really came full circle. It's just so many signs. I really am a person that looks for signs and things that other people may not see. Since she passed, I have to be that way because she sends messages all the time. And if you don't think about it, you'll overlook it. It's like she just knew I needed him on that day. I needed him before Christmas. And she sent him 4 weeks early. And he was 7 pounds, 12 ounces. And all the nurses said he was the biggest preemie they have ever seen.
Wow, that's amazing. He was ready.
Yes, he was so ready. He didn't need 4 more weeks.
That is so cool. I know I remember seeing, pictures of ladybugs and things like that posted on the group. And it's amazing.
Yes, it is because they always show up when you need them. And we really attribute ladybugs to her because right after she died, me and my husband just had to get away. And we didn't want to be home for Christmas. So we chose to go to Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Now, if you're trying to run away from Christmas, do not go to Gatlinburg. It is Christmas Central. So we were in our hotel, probably like the 4th floor on the top of a mountain. Wind was 40 miles an hour. And my husband stepped out on the balcony to smoke a cigarette. He came back in, and I kid you not, there was a ladybug on our bed. This ladybug found its way on top of a mountain in 40-mile-an-hour wind in the freezing cold, found its way to our room. And we just know, every time we see one, we just know it's her. And it's really cool.
Yeah, definitely.
And I know she'll always be here with us, but I want her here physically. It's really tough.
I know it's got to be a huge adjustment, especially when she was your life for nearly 3 years, probably from the moment you found out you were pregnant.
She really was. And now it's hard too, because I just want her here. She would be such a good big sister. I mean, she's a great big sister, but physically she would be so helpful and such a good big sister. And we just feel like we were robbed. You get to a point in your grief where you just feel like you were robbed. I was robbed of my entire future with her, and graduations and first kisses and prom dates. And, you think about all of that and you're just angry.
It's just not fair.
It's not.
Last year, something happened in the case that wasn't publicized at all, but it is public information. So Kirstie's mom was charged.
Yes, Kirstie's mom was charged with influencing a witness. So Kirstie's son and daughter, she had a daughter with another man named Avery, and then she had a son with Jeff. When they got arrested, her son and daughter went directly into her mother's care. Her mother's named Karen Flood. We believe that Karen was influencing the daughter in ways. We know she was saying things like, don't say anything bad about your mommy or she'll go to jail forever. And she failed to get her into adequate counseling. There was a DCFS order to put the daughter into counseling because we believe she may have been a witness to the crime. Come to find out months later, she absolutely was a witness to the crime. So having her interference in those first few months was really detrimental for our discovery and for just figuring out timelines of what happened. And then this poor little girl is having to deal and cope with what she witnessed, and she's not able to talk about it. And then she was in inadequate therapy. They had enough evidence to charge the mother, and I'm glad they did. I do feel more compassion and sympathy for Kirstie's mom. At the end of the day, she did not know what had happened at the time. And I guess she was just in a sick way trying to protect her daughter, but I feel she should have protected her granddaughter in that situation.
Especially knowing that she witnessed something. And not only was that traumatic for her because it was her mom committing the act, but also it was her friend.
Yes.
She was best friends with Fallon, right?
Yes, they were best friends. And I still get updates on her frequently. Her parents and I are going to meet someday because she still talks about Fallon. They called her Foul Bal all the time. They have put a little picture of Fallon in her room, and she said they see her frequently giving it kisses and telling her she loves her. And,
that's so sweet.
Even a year later, this young child, I think she just turned 5, and she still frequently talks about Fallon, her little friend, and it's heartbreaking.
Oh, yeah. Nobody should go through that, especially at such a young age. Well, I'm glad she's with her dad and, his family where she belongs.
I'm so glad that we were able to help them in any form or fashion, and I'm glad to have them as friends. And her stepmother, Dorothy, is amazing. She's beautiful. We've become really close over the phone this past year, and I can't wait till we can all get together. And I think they'll be lifelong friends of ours. And I just always want Kirstie's daughter to know that it was never her fault. And I can't imagine the type of guilt a child would feel over something like that. And I can only hope and pray that she just will not remember it. She was young at the time. She was 3 going on 4. And I don't have any memories before 5. So I'm really hoping and praying that she'll grow and she won't have any kind of memory of that night.
Yeah, I hope so too, especially if she's now in counseling and can work through any trauma that might be lingering.
Exactly. And she's doing amazing. And I think she just started preschool. She's happy. She's doing great. So I'm really happy for that.
That's good to hear. I really felt for Avery. It was just so awful that he should even be fighting such a battle. It just seems so obvious.
It really was. It baffled me. What we learn about Kirstie is that she's a very jealous person. She's very bitter. And that's the theory on why she even was saying all these negative things about me and or even did this. She was angry. I had just gotten married to my husband. We had just gotten our own little apartment. I'm working 50 hours a week. In my mind, who's going to be jealous of that? But she truly was. And someone I thought was my dear friend that I love so much really, really hated me. And it was jealousy. And that's a working theory. And I really think all of it fits.
It must just destroy your trust in people.
It absolutely does, because she was so supportive on the surface, how much she loved me and my husband Cameron, and how happy she was for us and how beautiful our relationship was. But she did throw in things like, I wish I could get married. I wish Jeff would propose. I wish X, Y, and Z. But she never said it in a hateful way. Mm-hmm. But deep down, she was feeling it in a hateful way.
It's pretty scary how much some people can really hide their true feelings and intentions like that.
It is terrifying.
Jeff is charged, but it seems like they don't really think he physically did anything. Or has that changed? Or can you even talk about that?
I can talk about it some, and I can actually confirm I don't think he physically did anything. She had a Wise camera in her house, and it came to light about 6 months later. They found the SD card with a lawyer. It's this whole debacle, but she basically, most of the crime is actually on video footage, which is terrifying. I will say I've never seen the video, and we won't ever see it. They're not going to put us through that.
Good.
And one of the detectives on the case, who I became very close with, called me the night he found it. They found it, and he said, Kristin, if I could give you any advice, it's don't watch that video.
Oh my God.
So pretty much from what they can tell there, he didn't physically harm her, no, but he was standing right there watching the whole thing happen. It's mind-blowing that at any point he could have stepped in and stopped her, and he didn't. I hold them in the same regard. He's just as bad. There's no redeeming qualities about this man. He has continually lied on her behalf. There's absolutely nothing redeeming about Jeffrey Myers. Until this is done, it will never be done, right? But
no.
Until this is done, we get dragged into court whenever they need us. And obviously we're going to be there for every single thing, but it's reopening the scab every single time.
Yeah. Do you
it's
plan to attend the trial itself?
absolutely. I'm a key witness in the trial, so I have to attend. Of course, I would be there regardless. There will be parts of the trial where I'll be allowed to leave, like when they show the video, for instance, and
Good. Okay.
certain things like that. She's going to let me and my family step out because nobody is too keen on watching that video. And
No.
I feel guilt over that, right? I have to work with this through my therapist because she went through it and I can't even watch it. But she says, you know, Kristin, no one's going to fault you for that. One. And
No.
two, what is it going to accomplish? Nothing.
It'll keep that in your head forever. So it's probably better that you don't see that. And some of the photos, I imagine, would be
Exactly.
best to avoid.
And, you know, I saw her in the hospital that night, and I know enough just from that. She had a skull fracture. Her liver, spleen, and colon were all ruptured. Her entire body was swollen and purple, and she didn't even look like my Fallon at all. It was terrifying, and I was just crying and crying and crying. And, you know, I was kissing her and telling her I'm sorry, and it's hard to go back to that night. I can't even talk about it without. Oh, I have serious nightmares, and I'm on a pharmacy of medications, and I was having night terrors and not sleeping, and it's been.
The funeral home did an amazing job making Fallon look beautiful. Of course, she doesn't look the same, but at least they did the best job they possibly could.
They really did. And they had a little headband on her head to cover some of the bruising. And before we buried her, I took it off. And Fallon, from the time she was born, would wiggle out of hats. You know, all these people dress their little baby girls up in cute little bows and stuff. But it's few and far between you'll see a picture of Fallon in any type of headband or hat because she just wouldn't wear them. So before we buried her, I took it off. And I kissed her. And I was like, she would be rolling in her grave if she had to have this headband on. But they did do a beautiful job. You know, again, you close the casket and you know that's the last time you're ever going to physically see your loved one on this earth. And it's very symbolic in a weird, you just don't understand it until you've been through there having to close the casket on a loved one. It's, you know, they gave you this giant book and there's thousands of choices. It took me about 2 whole minutes to figure it out. It's like it just came to me. You know, it's like she was just telling me like, this is what she would have wanted. I had the bubblegum pink casket and inside was an embroidery of a carriage with some horses and her initials. It was very symbolic to me. It was like the little princess carriage was taking her off to heaven. She was a girly girl at heart. She loved to wear, you know, we have little costumes and princess dresses. And if she had a choice, she would wear them all the time. So oftentimes around the house, she'd be wearing her little sequins princess dress, you know, so I let her wear it. I was like, okay, you know, so she was a girly girl at heart.
She did have a lot of dresses from all the pictures I've seen.
Oh, she did. She loved her little dresses and she was a fashionista. I mean, she knew when she looked cute. So she was so funny.
She seemed like a kid who knew exactly what she wanted and how to get it.
She was super independent. She just always wanted to do everything by herself. You know, as soon as she could use her hands, she wanted to hold her bottle. I'd try to feed her, you know, as she got older and she wanted to hold her spoon and she wanted to feed herself. And, you know, that usually ended up with food all around her face and not actually in her mouth, but I let her do it. But she wanted to do things by herself. And as she got older, she wanted to dress herself and she'd come in with her pants on backwards, or one time she put both legs into one leg of the pants and she put her shoes on the wrong feet, you know, but she wanted to do it. So I'd watch her for a little bit and I'd be like, you need help? She'd be like, yeah.
And she was pretty close with your family, right? She had a good relationship with your sisters and your mom.
Oh, yes. So close. You know, I didn't meet my husband until she was about 15 months old. So I was a single mom that whole time and it was really hard. Yeah. So I moved back in with my mother when she was about 6 months old and I lived there until she was about 15 months old. Me and my husband got our own little place and we moved out. We weren't married at the time. We got married a few months afterwards. So I had lived with my mom and my sisters were always there and they absolutely adored Fallon. And my middle sister, who was never keen on ever having children, definitely got her mind changed a little bit when she met Fallon. So one day she definitely aspires to have children. And my younger sister, in the beginning of the pandemic, also lost her job. So she really helped me so much in the beginning with watching Fallon. They were so, so close.
I love the way Cameron seems to have taken to Fallon so quickly and just adored her like she was his own.
Yeah, he really did. From the second they met, we dated a few months before I ever introduced them. I just always felt like I wanted to be sure about somebody before they ever met Fallon. And I mean, the second they met, it was just instant. You could just see he just fell in love with her. And she really took to him too. And anyone will tell you, if me and Cameron were around, she was picking Cameron. She loved Cameron. And she started calling. We never coached her. She just one day started calling him daddy, and we let it be. Regardless of biology, I will always say Cameron is her father. As soon as she met Cameron, it all fell into place, and he was the daddy she was supposed to have. He's the daddy she chose, and he chose.
That's really special.
Fallon was so, as I said, independent. She was super outgoing and sweet. Being a single mom, I had her in daycare from 8 weeks on. I had to. And so she was never scared of people. And it was a kind of a point of contention in a way. I mean, one day we were leaving the doctor's office and some lady was walking out and she just ran up to her and grabbed her hand, and she would have gotten in this woman's car. She loved music. She loved to dance. One time we were in a Chinese buffet, and the little ambiance music they play in the background, and she would just start dancing. I mean, you put on music and she would just dance and twirl around, and she was so smart. I mean, always just so, so smart. And ahead of the curve in many ways. And she was really in tune to feelings, and she could tell if you were sad or stressed, and she would just come and give you a hug. And she was just empathetic and compassionate, independent. She had a little fire about her. She was a little like spitfire. Every toddler has their temper tantrums, but they were few and far between with Fallon. I think a lot of parents say this about their children, but truly ask anybody who ever came in contact or watched her. I know I'm the biased one, I'm the mom, but anyone would tell you she was just an easy baby, easy kid. My best friend Megan watched her a few times for me. She was like 3rd trimester pregnant. She was like, let me watch her. I need some practice. So she said that they would take a nap, and she would put her in her little pack and play, and she would wake up a lot of times, and Fallon would be awake just sitting there quietly. And as soon as she saw that Megan was awake, she would be like, hi. It's like she knew that she was sleeping, and what kind of toddler just lets you sleep? She was she was amazing. It's so hard to describe, but she listened to me. She minded very well for a 2-year-old. I just think she was just super intelligent. She was very advanced, and I always say she would have been the next president or something, an astronaut. I mean, she truly, your parents tell you, and then you tell your kids, you can be anything you want, but she truly she could have done anything she set her mind to. She was just always happy and go lucky and ready to go. Even when she was sick, she had a double ear infection one time, and I wouldn't even known until I felt her head. I was like, you feel hot. And I took her temperature, and of course she's running a fever. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I rushed her to the doctor, and she has a double ear infection. So I was like, oh my gosh, Fallon, I wouldn't even have known you were sick. Thank gosh for a fever in that scenario. It didn't bother her none.
Well, I'm just so sorry this happened, and that you have to deal with all of the fallout. And there's so many facets to it, between going through your grief and your families. And then the whole court situation is another story altogether. And the things you have to endure there is completely unfair.
Thank you. Yeah, it's, death is tragic no matter the circumstance, right? Especially the death of a child. But when you throw in the element of murder, it really adds so much more. I often say Kirstie originally said she fell and hit her head on the slide, and I really wish that's what had happened. That would be so much easier to deal with. Again, losing a child is never going to be easy for anybody, and I have sympathy and empathy for anyone who's had to lose a child, because I understand. But again, you throw in that murder and court, and it just adds a whole nother level of grief and disparity to an already horrendous situation. And there's a really good organization. I went to their conference last year. I'm planning on attending again. It's called the Parents of Murdered Children. I will say I do want to shout them out because they're amazing. And, you know, it was so good to be not only in a room, but I mean, a ballroom full of people who had their child murdered. And it's just this horrible phenomenon. And again, we were talking earlier about true crime and stuff. And a lot of people don't put humanity on certain victims. These are people's children, whether they're 30, 40 years old. They're someone's child. We need to put humanity on these victims, one. And two, to be in not just a room, but a ballroom full of people who had their child taken by violent crime is very eye-opening and it's shocking. And I feel lucky in so many ways. So many of these people had cold cases or, you know, the murderers getting out after 6 years, or they're going up for parole after 30. And it's just, even when it's done, it will never be done. As long as these people are in the correctional facilities, it's scary, but there's always that chance, you know, are they going to be paroled one day? Again, just to be in a room full of people that understood me, and we all have these same feelings of like, we just feel like a circus freak. And it's not that people aren't compassionate. They just don't know what to say. I don't anticipate her to plead guilty, but she's facing 3 life sentences plus 35, because if you see in the indictment, there was also a sexual battery charge, but that charge itself holds like a 35-year sentence. So she's facing multiple life sentences plus 35. So for her, there really is no incentive to plead guilty. She's not getting a plea deal. So I don't anticipate her pleading guilty. I hope she finds it in her heart to, because her daughter will possibly have to testify, and she's just putting everyone through so much heartache, but I don't think she cares about that. So
the only thing that could come out of the trial is her looking much, much worse than she already does. So
exactly. So I don't know. I don't know what angle her defense is going to try to go with. So that'll be interesting to see here in these following weeks.
I'm really glad we got a chance to do this and that we were able to hear more about Fallon. I think that's so important to remember who she was. Obviously with you behind her, she'll never be forgotten.
Thank you. That's my goal, is to live her legacy, and I want her to be remembered in a good light. And I have to remind myself daily that if I fall apart, I'm not remembering her in a good light. If anyone wants to follow my Facebook page, Justice for Fallon, I do post court updates on there when I get them, and I post little memories and stuff of her. I've built a pretty awesome little community over there. So
yeah, you have. There's so many amazing pictures of her, and I'll put a link to it in the show notes so that everyone can find it.
Thank you so much. And yeah, here in March, post some court updates there, and I will let everyone know if we're going to go to trial or not. We'll see what happens.
Whatever happens, I will be crossing every finger and toe I have that Fallon gets her justice and that you guys can start to heal from there.
Thank you so much. Me too.
Thank you so much to Kristin for taking the time to talk to me and sharing her memories of Fallon. I wish Kristin, Cameron, and their sweet baby boy nothing but health and happiness. According to her obituary, Fallon was an absolute angel on earth. Fallon loved to dance and sing. She loved Mr. Butters, her kitten. She had a favorite stuffed animal, Lovey, and he was always with her. Fallon never met a stranger and loved talking with people. Fallon was a well-behaved, happy little girl who loved her mommy and daddy, riding around the house on her scooter, coloring, and pushing her Barbie doll around in her toy shopping cart. She was the biggest source of joy in her parents' life. Her little voice was the sweetest thing, and to end this episode, I'm going to play a few clips for you from videos Kristin and Cameron have posted online, so you can hear this innocent little girl singing and playing and interacting with the family who loved her more than life itself.
You want to go bye-bye, go see Mommy?
Yeah.
Yeah? You want to go see Mommy?
Yeah.
Yeah? You can go bye-bye? Go see Mommy?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Should we go?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Daddy.
Hi, Daddy.
Hi, Daddy.
Hi, Daddy.
What are you looking at?
Huh? Mommy. 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 Mommy.
Mommy. Mama.
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 Yeah, you having fun? Yeah. Is it fun? Yeah. Whee!
Rest well, Fallon. You will get justice, and you will never be forgotten. My sources for this week were 11 Alive, the Sandy Springs Police Facebook page, Pool Funeral Home, Facebook, WSB TV2, GoFundMe, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the Fulton County Court Record Search, Fox 5 Atlanta, the Dr. Phil Show, the Justice for Fallon Facebook page, Law and Crime, the Georgia Department of Corrections website, the Fulton County Jail website, and Fallon's mom, Kristin Gantt. That's it for this week. Join me next week for another story. If you like the show, please follow or subscribe to Suffer the Little Children on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, Spreaker, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast listening app. And please leave me a 5-star rating and a positive review on your favorite podcast platform. Visit the website at sufferthelittlechildrenpod.com, where you can listen to episodes or become a patron for rewards ranging from a shout-out by name on the show to bonus content and exclusive gifts. Follow the podcast on Facebook, Instagram, Tumblr, and Pinterest at Suffer the Little Children Pod, and on Twitter and TikTok at STLCpod. View photos related to today's episode on Facebook and Instagram. For more stories like the one you heard today, visit sufferthelittlechildrenblog.com. This podcast is researched, written, hosted, edited, and produced by Lane. All music for the show is licensed from audiojungle.net. Email tips, comments, questions, or case suggestions to sufferthelittlechildren.pod@gmail.com. For more information about preventing or reporting child abuse, visit childhelp.org or call your area's child abuse hotline. If you see something, say something. Until next week, bye everyone.